Welcome back. It is a wonderful journey we're going to be on together as we study this God of 100%. I'm looking forward to going through different stories in Scripture with you for two purposes. One, so that we can again be reminded of what God did long ago. And secondly, that we will remember that the God of yesterday is the God of today. And just as they believed that he would come through, you and I can too as well. So where we begin this week is in a time period that was very difficult for the Israelite people. The Israelite people were the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, the children of Abraham. And you have this wonderful legacy, and within this legacy you have wonderful highlights and great times of failure, but in all of it, God is working and doing amazing things. And we're going to be going to the book of Jeremiah today. It's named after the prophet. Within this book, we find his words. And Jeremiah is a prophet that comes in a very difficult time, as I said, in Israelite history. To give you a real brief background on this, you have Israel, and they are a mighty nation, but they've been disobedient to God over and over again, and God keeps telling them, you need to stick with me, and if you don't, there's going to be consequences, logical consequences that come when you don't follow in the right way. And so he says that I am going to send a foreign power in, and this is going to happen. And sure enough, it did. A guy named King Nebuchadnezzar of the Babylonians comes in, and he takes over Israel, Jerusalem, and then he exiles some or takes away Jews and makes them leave their homeland. And Jeremiah is, in this context that I'm going to be talking about in chapter 29, is actually writing a word of encouragement and prophecy to the exiles, to those people who are no longer in Jerusalem. So if you can picture Jerusalem on the eastern side of the Mediterranean Sea, where they call that their home, or they're scattered throughout the east there, not in their place of location. Some as far away as modern day Iraq, down by the Persian Gulf. So many of them are far away from home, and they're receiving these words. And I want to read just two verses out of chapter 29, verse 12 and 13. It says this: Then you, so Jeremiah's talking to the Jewish people, the exiled ones, then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. Now these words are coming from Jeremiah, but they are spoken on behalf of God. So when it says, you will call on me and I will listen, this is God speaking through Jeremiah. So let me say that again as it would be understood from God. It says, when you call on God and come and pray to him, when you seek God, and you will find God when you seek God with all of your heart. This is what that text is saying. Now, this is not our story. This is the exiles of Israel's story. But the promise still remains. The promise that when we call out to God, that he is listening remains true. That when we seek God, that it remains true. That God does not play hide and seek with us. This is not the kind of seeking we're talking about. God's not hiding in a dark corner waiting for us to find him. He's obviously not waiting to jump out and scare us. He is out in the open, and we need to seek him. Now, sometimes we have hard times seeing him, and that's not his fault, that's ours. Sometimes our sin is getting in the way, sometimes our business is getting in the way, and so part of seeking God is decluttering our life of business sometimes, so we have time to be still and know, as the scripture says. Sometimes we need to thin out those, or to take out of our lives those things that don't belong, that sin that blinds us, as the scripture talks about. So many times we can be caught up in sins that turn us away, as you would think they would, turn us away from God. And if God is in front of me and I'm turning this way, I'm obviously not seeking God. I'm pursuing the sin that entangles. I'm pursuing that thing that is grabbing me, and I want to get desperately away from, but I'm just drawn to it because of my sinful nature. And God says, leave that and seek me. And what's the promise? You will find me. So it's not seek me and you might find me. It's seek me and you will find me. Call on me and I'll answer if I'm not busy, or call on me and you might hear back from me. No, God says, call on me and I will answer you. So where are you today in regard to calling on God and seeking God? Has it been a while since you've talked to God? And maybe you've not talked to God in a while because you're not really sure if he's listening. Well, let me assure you that he is listening. And one of the greatest ways that you can hear back from him is to be in his word. You pray, you read the word, you listen to what God is doing. You get into community, into church community, into community with a few believers of like mind, and you talk about what God is doing. You share stories of how God's involved in your life and answered prayers. And these are great ways that you can hear, because God does speak to us in very unique ways, and sometimes you may actually hear the voice of God, but that is the exception. Most of the time we hear from God through his word and through gathering together and worship and learning. Very few times do we hear the voice of God. Some of us never hear the voice of God directly in our ears, but we all can hear him when we come to his word. And we seek him when we seek out, not just listening, but we're looking for him. And what that means is we're intently thinking about seeking. If you are a hunter, you understand what this is, to be passionately tracking down something that you're in pursuit of. Or if you're a person who's a treasure hunter, you are consumed with the idea of, I'm wanting to find this thing because it brings me joy. Well, think of that multiplied infinitely, that we are tracking down God, or we're seeking out God. And the great thing about this is God is not hiding behind a tree, and God's not buried by some map of a treasure. God is out in the open. Watch for him. You can see him in the beauty of the world. You can see him in the loving word of a friend. You can see him in worship. You can see him in the text. Make sure that you're calling upon God because he hears you. Make sure you're seeking God because you will find him.